Here comes the first of two speeches today. This one's from me. Shortly after I left New York City to become general manager of the Seattle Symphony, the Symphony held a board and a senior staff retreat. And the chairman of the board, Ron Woodard, who was president of the Boeing Commercial Airplane Group, said something that totally shocked me. In framing the discussion, Ron made the observation that America had once looked from its eastern seaboard across the Atlantic to Europe for its commerce, for its culture, for its sense of heritage. But today, he said, and this was in 1996, he said, America looks from the shores of the Pacific with its independent and innovative spirit facing now toward Asia. Since I'm a born and bred New Yorker, perhaps you can see why I found Ron's relocation of America's center of gravity so shocking. Excuse me. A West Coast invention. So when I recovered from my shock, I realized that I'd heard something that was as profound as it was simple, and that is that time and place really matter. And when I imagined the Seattle Symphony through these new lenses, all kinds of new possibilities opened up for me. And it's possible this aha moment was not only about my New York centrism. Orchestras dwell, after all, much more in the world of timelessness than timeliness. We think of our repertoire as being for the ages, and indeed most of it is. And the orchestral ensemble itself has proven to be so durable that it's hardly changed in the last 200 years. So it's maybe no wonder that time and place haven't always been in the forefront of our thinking. So I want to spend the next few minutes talking about just a few of the reasons why time and place should be very important considerations for orchestras today. And these reasons have to do with programming, with finances, with diversity, and with artistry. So we'll start with programming. Earlier this year, Sarah Lutman, former CEO of the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, asked in her blog, how would music, people, land, and culture be served if orchestras everywhere were to work harder to be not just what they are, but where they are? And some orchestras have been creating extraordinary answers to this question. The Black Hills of South Dakota, bloodied by the Great Sioux War, is just one of the sites for the extraordinary partnership between musicians of the South Dakota Symphony and the musicians of the Lakota tribe. The Erie Canal, whose waters brought life to the cities of Western New York, will be the venue for the Albany Symphony's Rising Waters concerts, featuring new works commissioned for the canal towns of Schenectady, Utica, and Rome. And boasting 5 national parks, I just learned this when I was in Salt Lake City, Utah is America's national parks capital. The Mighty Five, as they are called: Zion, Bryce Canyon, Arches, Canyonlands, and Capitol Reef. And amidst their red rock, sandstone spires, towering cliffs, and deep canyons, the Utah Symphony will perform in each park this summer with programs designed to complement the grandeur of Utah's extraordinary landscape. These performances, and many like them, reveal creativity emerging from a deep sense of place. And so now, along with the worldwide acclaim our orchestras enjoy for their virtuosity, we can add productions like these that make America's orchestras uniquely American. As Sarah put it, hold your place and its people dear. Embrace the deep connections that nourish vitality and satisfaction, that capture and reflect the great intelligence of nature itself. Be where you are. So, to change to finance for a second. Having a strong sense of place also means realizing that the challenges and opportunities in your local market are at least as important, if not more so, than benchmarks against orchestras in other communities. Simply being in the same budget category as other orchestras does not in itself establish a sufficient basis for comparison. And that's because local market dynamics, such as the presence of other performing arts organizations, size of the population, community wealth, demographic trends, and countless other factors are essential to forming a more complete and accurate way to assess your environment and your relationship to peer organizations. Here's a cautionary tale that illustrates this point. This was relayed to me by board members of the Canton Symphony when I was there a few weeks ago. About 10 years ago, the symphony decided they needed a new concert hall, following the path of quite a few other performing arts organizations. They set about to raise tens of millions of dollars. Board member Bob Labensberger was spearheading the campaign when a friend from out of town said to him, "Are you sure you really want to raise all that money? And even if you do, is it there in your community? And where are you going to get the money to operate the hall? And oh, by the way, what are you going to do on those other 320 nights that you're not performing in your concert hall?" Well, all this was enough to make Bob and his fellow board members think twice. So instead of a new hall, they chose to make acoustical improvements in their current hall. They built ancillary spaces adjacent to it that provided additional lobby space, desperately needed office space for staff, and amenities for musicians, and a multi-purpose room for educational and performance activity. And all of this was accomplished through a very successful $5 million campaign. And on May 19, just 3 weeks ago, Zimmerman Symphony Center opened to great acclaim. And for any of you who don't know, Gerhard Zimmerman has been the orchestra's remarkable music director for the past 33 years. So the Canton Symphony demonstrated the wisdom to set their sights clearly on what the local philanthropy and audience could support, not on what they saw other organizations doing. If you have any doubt about their wisdom, you should check out last year's report, Set in Stone, from the University of Chicago's Cultural Policy Center. The report cites failure to consider local capacity, that is an underestimation of operating costs and an overestimation of revenue, as the leading cause of the many failed arts building projects between 1994 and 2008. So to turn our attention from place for a moment to time, an unmistakable feature of this moment in America is the movement toward a majority-minority population. I see organizations and entire sectors adapting to this change as they diversify their workforces. Whether walking the corridors of Congress, meeting with our peer arts organizations, or joining with our partners across the nonprofit sector, I experienced the richness of working with people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds, but not so much in orchestras. I think we value diversity, but orchestra leaders have to prioritize diversity and inclusion work if we are to make any real progress. Very little of import happens in organizations without the visible commitment of its leadership. Board and executive staff have to own and lead this work together with their dedicated education and community engagement staff and volunteers. We can, though, look to some incredible successes. Last week, I was on the League's diversity workgroup call, and I was amazed to hear Kathy Finley from the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra report that 36% of their predominantly black audience from their African roots concerts had migrated to other CSO concerts. This hard-won success goes back to 2001 in the aftermath of the Cincinnati riots sparked by the shooting of a 19-year-old African American by a Cincinnati police officer. In a gesture of community healing, the orchestra gave its first performance in an African American church. And through sustained and relentless relationship building since 2001, the Cincinnati Symphony has engaged the clergy. They've created a chorus representing 50 different African American churches and has secured sponsorship from 38 minority business entrepreneurs. It takes that kind of a commitment over that length of time to get these kinds of results, but obviously it can be done. So I would encourage all of you, CEOs, board leaders, musician leaders, call Kathy, call others who are having success. This is the time to step this up, dial it up. This is terribly important work, and some people are figuring out how to do it. This moment, 2014, is also the year that saw the end of the longest lockout on record. As I've said elsewhere, we can debate who was more at fault for this tragedy, but ultimately this was an institutional failure. There's only one Minnesota orchestra, and it includes its musicians, its staff and board, people whose lives and livelihoods are inextricably interdependent and wound up in one another. They were unable to communicate effectively, to trust one another, or solve their shared problems. There are many important conversations to have and lessons to draw from the recent spate of work stoppages. For now, I'd like to offer just one promising way forward, which I've seen in Detroit. Everyone in the Detroit Symphony has a t-shirt. And the t-shirt says, "One DSO." And the orchestra gave them out to honor the way that their board, staff, and musicians came together following the 6-month strike. And this shift in mindset, the recognition that they are all part of one organization, not two, not three, but one organization, was a critical step forward in what we are now all observing as a thrilling rebirth of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. The announcement recently of their most recent contract settlement 6 months early gives testimony to the amazing resilience of the DSO and what is possible when effective relationships can be built. As Claire Chase so vividly demonstrated in Wednesday's keynote, this is also the time of the entrepreneurial musician. Her message hardly needs reinforcing, but we should take a moment to notice and to continue to support the entrepreneurs already playing in our orchestras. From the videographers creating content for their orchestra websites, to the ambassadors building new community relationships. And consider this, in the last 2 years, 5 musicians have become CEOs of the orchestras in which they played. And 2 of those musicians had chaired their orchestra's negotiating committees. This should tell us something about the breadth of talent in our orchestras. And for at least these 5 musician managers, there was a desire to put themselves literally in another person's shoes. And that's an example that we all could follow. So to sum up, my message is simple. Be the orchestra of and for your community in this time and in your place. Invest now in building the relationships necessary to be one organization. And it's time to unleash the full range of creativity and talent of all of the people involved in our orchestras. I'd like to finish this set of remarks with some comments offered by Leslie Chihuly, chair of the Seattle Symphony Board, that she gave from the stage of Carnegie Hall during the orchestra's recent Spring for Music performance. Leslie said, "Seattle's a special town, and we believe that the orchestra should really be reflective of the city in which we live. And so we have opportunities to do things a little bit differently. We want to reflect the creativity and the innovation and the spirit of adventure that defines the Northwest. After all, we're the city where Boeing engineers helped define air travel, Amazon and Microsoft have changed the way we use technology, and Starbucks has popularized coffee culture. So we're turning it upside down and inside out. We're performing in a lot of alternative environments with different kinds of concert formats, and we're having so much fun rethinking what the orchestra can be for Seattle." So if you want another sampling of what Leslie's talking about, you should go to hear the Seattle Symphony tonight in Benaroya Hall in their Sonic Evolution concert. Thank you very much.